A huge perspective changer for me was when I got introduced to my friends at Food for the Hungry. They gave me the opportunity to sponsor a little boy in Lima, Peru named Juan Andre. It changed my life. I thought I was changing his, but it actually changed my life and perspective forever. I want to give you the opportunity, along with Food for the Hungry, to change a child's life. Go to fh.org/Anthony Evans. That's fh.org/Anthony Evans to make a lasting impact today. Hi, I'm Anthony Evans.
I'm Stacy Kaiser.
And this is The Power of Perspective. The Power of Perspective is a series of conversations that we're going to have about things that we all have or will go through. My desire, along with Stacy, is to make sure that you come to the conclusion that lifelong change can happen when you realize the power of your perspective. Today we are talking about something that I think is very important to talk about, and I'm pretty sure you think is very important too, and that is relationships. Relationships are something that we all deal with, different levels of it, but I want to start this conversation because, to be honest, Stacy has helped me through a lot of relationship stuff, whether it's friends or just deeper stuff. She's been very, very key in me taking care of my well-being as related to relationship, because I'm a codependent type person, but we can talk about that later. So, Stacy, I want to start with how do you deal with a relationship that is going south? I'm asking, I have a question like that nobody asked. I want to ask it. How do you deal with a relationship that is going south, but you're a helper, codependent type, I'll save the day kind of person?
Right. I always call that being a victim of your compassion.
Oh, yeah.
Being somebody who sees the good in people, the best of intentions, tries to see the diamond in the rough and says, well, maybe if I do something differently, or if I can get them to do X, Y, or Z, things will get better.
Right.
And so what I like to say about that is, and this is a lesson that I had to learn in my profession, is that a person has to want to make change on their own. Bottom line is that people have to want to change. And so it doesn't matter how amazing you are, how much you try, if a person isn't wanting to change, they're not going to change. And then right. I think that there's another piece. Those of us are sort of hanging on, thinking, well, if I row this boat, it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And you will eventually grow tired. And the bottom line is, I think all of us, whether it's a friendship or an intimate relationship, relationships are supposed to be a give and take. Right. Frankly, it doesn't matter what your relationship is. It could be your hairdresser, your therapist, whatever it is. It needs to feel like it's a give and take. And so if you're the one who's giving all the time and that you're not getting, I think you need to take a good hard look at why you're still there and if it's worthwhile.
Yeah, you know what you said to me a second ago, you said diamond in the rough. Because you've used that in our time together, in my therapy. She has noticed that I always find diamonds in the rough as related to any kind of relationship.
Which is actually good.
Yeah.
It's a good quality because you see the good in people.
But you said something to me. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You said something to me. You said diamonds are beautiful. That's great. You see diamonds in the rough. But it takes explosions to get diamonds out of the rough. And if you're too close, you will get burned.
I said
yes,
that.
It was one of Stacy as he's dropped the mic moments in our therapy where it's like it can be 5 minutes in and I feel like, well, I can go now because we got it. That's what you said to me. You said it takes explosions to get diamonds out. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
I was like, yeah, you said it, because there's certain things that I just won't ever forget. And I feel like, from my perspective, and I'm sure some of the people watching and some of the questions we've gotten, they've talked about being in it, like how do you get out of that toxic scenario? So first of all, I think realizing that it takes explosions to get the diamond out, and if you're too close, you're going to get burned. But what's the escape route for somebody?
Right. Well, the short answer is walk away. It's time to go.
When you got people in their feelings, you know.
But this is what I always, a lot of people say follow your heart. And I think that applies for a lot of things, like for your passion, for your career.
Yeah. That's bad.
I think in relationships, when you follow your heart, sometimes your brain isn't with you. And so what I say to people is, if you are being hurt, if your mind is telling you this isn't right, that's the heart wants what the heart wants, it's not going to listen to you. So you need to follow your brain, and you need to do what you know is right to do. And if you can't, like I hear this all the time, people will say, I can't get out of that relationship.
Right.
And then I say, okay, so then don't pick up that cup. No, you can. You can get out of that relationship. You're not. And so then you need to dig deep and find out why. What is the reason that you are staying in a situation that is toxic or not good for you, or you're not getting what you need out of it?
She said, people say, this is all stuff that I have said to her. I know a lot of other people say it to her, but I have said all these things she's talking about, like where it's just like, I feel like I cannot figure a way out. And you have been like, yeah, you can. And back to the thing, did I cut you off? Because I do that a lot, especially when I have coffee. I turn into a crazy person. But you said something, excuse me, the feelings, or your heart, following your heart. My dad is just a wise man, as a lot of you know. But he said to me a long time ago, and I say it from stage all the time, your feelings do not have intellect. Your feelings cannot think. So doing the whole, like, I'm gonna follow my feelings, like they will mess you up. They feel as real can be, but in a lot of cases, I've had to bounce my feelings off, one, God's word, like what does he say about this? And then two, bounce my feelings off of the things that we've talked about, which are tactical, like this isn't good for you, this is actually hurting you to stay. And he also says your feelings can't be the engine, they have to be the caboose.
I love
like they have to follow your mind.
Really good.
Which you've helped me in so many ways follow what is actually logically the right thing to do, even though me all up in my feelings all the time, like I just live there. It's very hard to get out. So what are some other tactical ways or practical
yeah, I just
ways?
I want to say something about that, because here's the funny thing about feelings. Your feelings might say, I love this person, but your feelings also might say, I'm being hurt.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening to a lot of us is we only look at the I love this person feeling. We're not looking at the painful part that's happening and the fact that they're hurting our feelings.
Yeah. In a relationship scenario where you try to just look at the good part, this is another thing we also talked about. I think my sister said this to me. She said, Anthony, if I had a big pot of soup on the stove and I was stirring that pot and I put poison in it, just like a few drops of poison in the pot, what would you have to do to the whole pot of soup? And I was like, pour it out. You can't eat around the poison in that. And she's like, exactly. That is you trying to think about just the good stuff in a relationship. Most of it may be good. And if there's a few drops of poison, a lot of times the whole thing's got to go. Yep. Because you can't eat or you can't pick out the good stuff.
I
She
love
told me
that. No, and my metaphor is the bread one.
Yeah.
If you had a piece of bread and half of it was moldy, would you eat it? Yeah. And I've literally had people in a therapy session say to me, well, I would just like cut it off and eat the other side. A good relationship is not supposed to be hard. It's not supposed to be that difficult.
Yeah, or stay in a place of just being hard and difficult all the time.
You might have hard times where you're supposed to come together and work together and make it less hard. Mm-hmm. There might be difficult moments where somebody in the relationship is struggling or someone's having a bad day and they're crabby, and that's okay. But it's not supposed to be repeatedly difficult where you just feel like you're climbing up a hill and someone throwing rocks at you all the time.
Yeah. You know, something else you said to me as it relates to relationships, friendships, all of it, is that, because you obviously know what I do, I'm on stage a lot. She said, if you were on stage doing a show and there was somebody in the front row that was being noisy and pulling you out of character, what would you do to that person? And I was like, well, you'd have to tell them to be quiet, of course. Then what would you do? You'd move them out of the seat and put them in the back of the room, of course. Then if they're still making noise, you put them out of the room. And that's what you told me as related to people, relationships in my life that were pulling me out of character. I, a lot of times, were like, you can stay in that front seat, but just please be quiet, and try to work that through. And you were like, no, move them, because there's somebody who wants to be in that seat, who will actually be excited about watching you be in character, watching you be who you're supposed to be. And that advice changed my life, because I didn't realize that once you empty that seat, I always thought there's an insecurity in me that thinks that seat will forever be empty. That seat will forever be empty. But the people who have came and sat in those seats in the front now in my life, who want to be there and understand the value of that seat, it's helped me stay in character even more, because I know how excited they are about seeing me be who I'm supposed to be.
That is my whole thing about all relationships. So this might not necessarily be an intimate relationship. This might be friends or family. I always think, you happen to be in a theater setting, but I think it applies to anyone. It could be like a stadium, a theater, is that some people get the A+ seats, some people get the B, the C, balcony, and then some people are out the door. And I think we all need to be more conscious about where we're placing people. Because if you have people who are too close to the front seat, they have too much access to you, then you are distracted by them. Then you're shushing them, then you're dodging bullets, then you're dealing with it, and you're not able to deal with the rest of your life. And so that's where you see that your work will be impacted, your family life will be impacted, your peace will be impacted. And so keeping the dangerous, toxic, destructive people away from you actually serves to protect your peace and help you make your life better.
Right. Protecting your peace and keeping those people away is huge. But what about the person who's watching right now who is like,
right.
What if I'm married to that person? And listen, I am not married, so I'm not going to speak to all this. But what do you tell somebody who is in a scenario, especially a Christian marriage, where you're not supposed to be like, yo, this is bad for me, and be out? Like, what would you tell somebody in that scenario? What are the steps? I know it's different.
Well, I would say the same thing to everyone across the board, which is, first of all, if you are a parent in a situation like that, when the parent suffers, the kids suffer. And so you really need to take care of that suffering. If you're not a parent, or you are a parent, all of this applies, which is that you are not supposed to be suffering in your relationship. You need to go get help. You need to go get support. So that could be that you speak to a spiritual counselor, a priest, a preacher, pastor, any of that. It could be that you come to a counselor like me, that you need to go and reach out for resources. And then if it's not you who's causing the trouble in the relationship, but you actually feel like it's your partner and you're like, I want to get away from them, what you want to start asking yourself is this person willing to go get help? Because people change, people can get better, but if they're not trying to change, and this is what we see a lot. The more like toxic, narcissistic, nasty people, they'll always blame you. And so you're walking around on eggshells trying to like behave and do the right thing, but really it's them that needs to change. And so you want to turn the tables on them and see if you can actually get them to change and try and get them to go to counseling with you and try to get them to get help. And if not, I think you have to take a serious look about, whether this is actually healthy for you to be in.
Yeah. Now you mentioned narcissism, which is a whole other, listen, that's a whole other situation. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, which for most of you know what that is, but somebody who basically, it's like they're the king of their world. They're right all the time. That's the bottom line. Like
they don't see other people.
Yeah, period. They don't. Right. So there's a bunch of, you can look up the signs of that. But when you're dealing with somebody like that, what is a strategic way to actually get that person, because they don't think anything's wrong with them. So how do you get that person to come to therapy?
Narcissists don't typically go to therapy because they're great. They're perfect. They think they're great. So if I'm perfect, I don't need to go get help. And if you can get them to therapy, they'll typically try and point the finger at all the things that you need to change. And so if you look up narcissist and you say, oh, I'm in a relationship with a person like that, then you should take yourself to therapy. And the bottom line is, narcissists typically don't change at all. They're just not interested in changing. So that's a relationship that's going to be problematic. If you're just dealing with sort of your everyday annoying person, someone who isn't being considerate of your feelings, those are the kind of people that if you can't get them into therapy, or counseling of some sort, go yourself. And then hopefully that spiritual counselor or, the counselor like me is going to say, okay, we need you to bring your partner in, and then they will come, by the command of someone else.
Right. They'll teach. Yeah. They'll teach. I know it's all subjective, but them teaching you the steps to getting there yourself.
Right.
Man.
Being that your family is so religious, what is the philosophy? Because I hear that a lot. Like, I'm a religious person, I can't leave.
Well, the bottom line, the thought is, and I know that there are biblical principles that give you certain things in a relationship. If they happen, then you have like a biblical right to leave a scenario, infidelity, or if you're in an abusive scenario that's not resolving and all that stuff. It's not, God doesn't say stay in that. Like, he's not asking us to do that kind of stuff. But I do believe that a lot of people, one of the questions that we'll get to was that, how as a Christian do I deal with the fact that I'm in a scenario I should not be in? And it's so subjective, and I don't want on here, on IGTV and YouTube to be like, you need to get out, because it's all different. But some people, as Christianity sometimes makes people suffer beyond what they're supposed to be suffering. And I think that I could say that and people will understand. Some people will understand. And I'm in no way saying leave, but also look at what the Bible says about it, because sometimes we go a little bit too far and put up with things that aren't necessarily, we take on actually like a Messiah complex where we feel like we're supposed to save and be this whole situation when that was Jesus, that wasn't you. So you can't handle all that, you know what I mean? So it varies a lot, but there are a lot of circumstances where you can.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is, if you are not in a situation where you are safe, you must protect yourself.
For instance, there was a lady who said, as it relates to biblical reasons and stuff, she says, how do I trust again after infidelities, plural, in a Christian marriage? That's again subjective, because is the person willing to change? I'm pretty sure that's a big part of it. Or is it kind of like, deal with this? But speak to that in relationships in general. When trust is broken because you're dealing with some stuff, how do you rebuild trust? Yeah,
I don't even think this is just a Christian thing. I think this is an issue for everybody. I think it becomes complicated with the Christian piece if your religious belief is that you're supposed to stay. But you brought up a really good point, is the person willing to change, and what are they willing to do to change, and how are they going about changing? Because it doesn't matter what their supposed reason is. They made the decision to go outside of the marriage, and this says infidelities, so it sounds like it's more than once.
She said plural.
And by the way, once can be just as damaging. It's not like, oh, everybody gets one free ticket. But trust is the foundation of a relationship. And so if you feel like you can't trust a person, it's a gigantic problem. And a lot of relationships never bounce back. I would say that the percentage is reasonably low of people who can actually get through an infidelity and stay together and live happily ever after. The relationships that work are the ones where both of the people are dedicated to figuring out what caused the infidelity, and working at building their relationship slowly from the ground up. But it can take years to begin to feel safe again.
So you have to be, dedicated to that process. That's
Both
the bottom
of you.
line. Yeah, you can't. It's not like one person wants it, the other person.
Yes.
I was wondering, as related to, I'm going back to the narcissist stuff, because I view like when there are kind of those moments in relationships where there's a super discord, I associate that with narcissism for some odd reason. Like, I associate that discord with dealing with that. And so I want to go back to that just for a second. If you are in a scenario with a narcissist, and let's say you're married to them, and because you've mentioned in some cases that narcissists, you believe that there's a spectrum, right? Like, there are 10s and there are 5s who are like workable. Right. But when you're dealing with a 10 and you married them, didn't know it because they're super charming and all that stuff, right? That's one of the characteristics. Really, then what? If they don't think there's anything wrong with them and they're not willing to change, do you just have to figure out a way to live, that way?
Yeah, I think this applies to anyone who is not willing to change. I think it applies to narcissists. I think it applies to anyone who says, this is me, this is what, this is the package, this is who I am. And I think we are left with 3 choices: to either put up with it, which will, include suffering, to leave, or to try to get them to change. And if not, then we only are left with 2 choices: put up with it or leave.
And that's just it.
That's just it. Yeah.
Wow. That's kind of discouraging and sad, but
that is when you are with somebody that isn't interested in making a change, you're left with either putting up with it or leaving. And I don't encourage anyone to be in a relationship with someone who says, this is me, this is who I am, I'm never going to change. Because if you're going to be together long enough, things are going to happen. Things are going to evolve, and people need to be able to move and grow and change through those relationships.
So you would say those are red flags?
Yes, absolutely.
In a dating scenario, when
absolutely.
Like, this is me, this is who I am.
Absolutely. Some people say it and don't mean it, so you sort of have to pick a little bit. But yes, that to me is a red flag. You want somebody who's flexible and wants to sort of move and change and work things out. Not somebody who wants something their way all the time.
What are some other red flags? Since you mentioned red flags,
lying is a red flag. Another giant red flag is a person who seems to be unable to commit
Oh.
So I worked with somebody who literally, the person that she was dating, the guy that she was dating, said, "Oh, I can't ever see you on Saturday nights, ever." It's like, okay, why? And he said, "Oh, well, I have something that I always do on Saturday nights," but she never knew what it was. So to me, that was a giant red flag.
Listen,
what was he doing on Saturday night? Well, she was the Friday night girl. And he had a Saturday night girl.
I mean,
and so that, or someone who, another red flag is someone who like doesn't want you to know their life or let you get to know their family. Also, somebody who's verbally abusive. Oftentimes, verbally abusive people escalate into being physically abusive people.
People let that slide because like it's verbal, and then he got mad or she got mad, and it was just a moment, and you're like.
And I don't believe people who, I'm not. It's not like everybody blows up, once in a great while. I'm talking about somebody who's literally verbally abusive.
Wow. So somebody, if you're like me, and I guess you kind of lean toward the helper, fixer, codependent kind of vibe, how do you get to the point? Well, you've actually taught me a lot of ways. How do you get to the place of making your peace your priority? Or, you know what I mean? Or kind of getting to the place where you actually know that without you being the helper, you can still find something great and be in something great. You don't have to find projects.
Right, that's it. You don't need a project. You don't need, if you want a fixer upper, buy like a junker car or a house that needs to be rebuilt.
Don't get in a relationship.
Don't get a person who needs to be fixed up and changed. You want to be with somebody who is a whole person, who maybe they get better because of you, but they don't need to be like built because of you.
They get better because of you, but they don't. You're not into building situations. Yes. So we're picking this back up with some questions, but I feel like we might have to do more relationship stuff because there's a lot. We're not even getting to we're not scratching the surface with all these questions, but we'll get a few now, and then y'all stay tuned and we'll make sure we get you covered. We'll do a few. How do I make my ex understand that our relationship is now just platonic?
So that's interesting. This person isn't saying if they are crossing the boundary, but sometimes people will say it's platonic and then they're like, "Oh, well, we fell into bed last night," or well, we were cuddling on the couch. So the way to really send a message that your relationship is platonic is to refuse to cross the line of being just friends. Period. Under no uncertain circumstances. So to the point that they beg, plead, cry, it's like no, 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 no. And eventually they'll get the hint. Now it's possible that they may not want to be around you in that way, that they're just hanging out waiting, thinking that maybe that you will bend and acquiesce. Yeah. And so just be prepared for that.
I'm like,
right.
What you doing? Like, did you hold his hand in the movie? Then,
yeah,
you know
can't.
Like, what's up?
No,
I don't feel like we got the whole story on that.
You need to treat the person like it's like your grandparent.
Oof, I get it, and sometimes they might go away because that's a hard transition to go from the one to one of many. And hey, I'm busy. I'll talk to you later. And to be treated like you're digressing in relationship. That's not a fun feeling at all.
No, but what I like about this is that this person is clearly a person who pushes boundaries and isn't respectful of someone's request. So I'm glad they're your ex. Good job.
Hey!
There's the silver lining.
Yeah, look at that. That's great. We have another one here. Now, what if the person that you're with is working on their process? Okay, we're not dealing with narcissists. We're doing like a toxic scenario, but they're willing to work on their process. But in their process of working on themselves, you're still getting hurt because they have moments of relapse into that old behavior. So you have great, and then relapse. Great. What do you do there? And if it's not a marriage, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's willing to do the work, but you're getting hurt along the way.
Yeah. So I'm very much a believer that if you are in a relationship like that you're not under any obligation to stay forever. Mm-hmm. If you feel like you're not getting your needs met, you feel like things are taking too long for the person to change, you feel like you're being hurt by the process of their change, you have some options. You can say, we're gonna break up now, but call me if you straighten this out, and if I'm still available, we can go out again. Or you can just say, this isn't good for me right now, we can be friends.
What if the person's response right there is like tears, no, I can get it together, and they do the heart thing to pull you back?
Then you can say, all right, well, as long as you're going to counseling regularly and whatever, I'll give it another month or so. But we are not put on this planet to tolerate what other people are putting us through.
Yeah.
You know, we all have our own pain. We all have our own issues. I do believe that when you're in a relationship, you need to have compassion for someone, especially someone who's working through something. But if you're being victimized by what they're working through, it's not okay for you to have to stick around. You're not obligated to do it.
Okay, let's do one more as related to relationships. And again, we'll jump into your questions. But this one's very interesting to me, and I think I know your answer. But this lady says basically the biological mom of her now husband had a child before and said the child is with his biological mom. Actually, the child has been with his ex-girlfriend, who is not the child's biological mom.
Oh.
So he's been, like, he basically told everybody to tell my current wife that you're the son's bio. So now she's finding out
That it's all a lie.
that it's a lie. And the husband did it because my son has a bond with her that I did not want to break. So with my ex, so I didn't want to break that, but I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want to say. So it's crazy. So she's like, I believe that in my marriage that this is unfaithfulness because I'm his wife now, and the kid's like hanging out with this ex-girlfriend. So I mean, she said that they've gone to therapy, whatever. He's been told he needs to make his choice between, he just needs to make a choice. But he's saying he will not stop having his son with her, the ex-girlfriend, not the posed bio mom, because he thinks that relationship is necessary for his son.
I mean, my biggest issue with this whole story is the lying.
Yeah, that's
Okay, because him sort of saying, well, I'm prioritizing my kid now, he should have walked into the relationship with that honestly and said, this is the situation, so that she would have had a choice. Like, she could have said, yes, I want to date you under these conditions or not. So to me, it was like false advertising.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. To me, that's a very, very big issue. And it's very clear he's making a choice. So he's saying this is the deal. And one of the things that I always say is whoever says no wins. So he said, no, I'm not changing. And so now she's left with those two choices that we talked about earlier. Put up with it or leave.
And in this scenario, you're like, the lying is the concern, like not the...
Yeah, all of it. I don't like any of it. This person's not being made a priority. But yes, the fact that when you walk into a relationship and you invest time, you should know what the deal is.
Right.
And so he hid a bunch of cards. He wasn't honest about it. So there's nothing I like about this story at all. Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I just want to add is sometimes there isn't a good choice. Sometimes staying is bad and going is bad. Sometimes you can't win. And so then you need to look at the long term and ask yourself, if I stay or if I go, what is my best shot for the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years?
The lesser of two evils.
Yeah, for me to be happy.
Yeah. The greatest thing that you taught me is the preservation of my peace and making sure that I'm operating on all cylinders as a person. I couldn't imagine having some of the things that were going on in my life before all the loss surrounding my family. Relationally, I couldn't imagine not working all that out and then having to go through grief at the same time I have people in my life who are toxic or, just hard. Some of them aren't just all the way toxic. Some of it's just hard. And I needed to make sure that was out of my life. So I really want to just reiterate the point of how important it is to get your peace together as much as you can, because a lot of times for you to operate well and take care of yourself well, you have to be starting from a foundation of peace and being willing to, and able to operate on all cylinders.
And I just want to add that, relationships are a part of life. They're important. But at the end of the day, you are the only person who's going to be with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If you don't protect your peace, if you don't have your back, there's not going to be anyone else that you can count on for sure. They'll do it. Yeah.
Stacy Kaiser, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back soon with more of The Power of Perspective.